Earlier this week, it was revealed that the Australian Navy will be getting long-range Tomahawk missiles to protect our shores. However, not everybody was elated from the announcement. The Australian's foreign editor, Greg Sheridan, wrote shortly after that although the missiles are a, quote, real weapon, close quote, that will be of use to our Navy, Navy still only has 3 ships that could one day be modified to take the Tomahawk missiles. It's pretty scary stuff. Joining me to discuss this and more is Greg Sheridan himself. Greg, welcome to the program and thanks for your time. Tell us why the acquisition of these Tomahawk missiles isn't the silver bullet it might seem.
Well, it's great to be with you, Amanda. The problem is the Australian defence debate is becoming a kind of pantomime in which we get increasingly Churchillian rhetoric for increasingly Neville Chamberlain policies. I've been advocating that we should get Tomahawks for a lot more than a decade. You know, Tomahawks have been around forever. We should have had them on our Navy years and years and years and years ago. They can hit an enemy 1,500 kilometres away, so that gives you the chance to hold an enemy at bay. And as the Defence Industry Minister, Pat Conroy, says, we live in the age of missiles, blah, blah, blah. But we've got 8 utterly useless Anzac frigates with only 8 missile cells each. They can never take Tomahawks. They don't have the Aegis combat system. The government has said nothing about putting Tomahawks on submarines. You've got to get a slightly different Tomahawk. You'd have to get the Americans to start producing them again. So we have precisely 3 modern warships in our Navy, the air warfare destroyers. Only in Australia could they be described as destroyers. They're really guided missile frigates, or they're air warfare frigates. They're quite small ships. They only have 48 missile cells. Chinese and American destroyers have 100. There's a new Korean missile destroyer which has about 120, 130 missile cells. You need all those because you've got to have a couple of dozen cells just to defend the ship from incoming missiles. Then you need other types of missiles. So we're going to buy up to 200 Tomahawk missiles. No timeline, no actual quantity of how many we're going to get or when we get them. But we've only got 3 ships we can deploy them on, and each of these ships only has 48 missile cells. So the Navy has a rule of 3. To deploy one ship, you've got to have 3 in the Navy. One's just coming home and one's being refitted and rested and so on. And so that means that all of this fabulous missile announcement means that at our most ferocious, at our most bristling, militarily threatening moment, we could deploy one ship which could carry perhaps 10 or 12 Tomahawk missiles. Now, that's 10 or 12 is better than nothing, but it's not much. We're the 12th or 13th biggest economy in the world, and we've got no defence force to speak of. You know, we couldn't challenge the Chinese. Our defence policy is simply to hope the Americans continue to look after us. And this is because the government itself has decided, and I must say, Amanda, like your government in the previous 9 years, to do absolutely nothing about building conventional military capabilities. They've committed to the nuclear submarine, which arrives in Star Trek time, and in the meantime, they're going to do nothing over the next 10 years. They're not adding a single missile cell to our surface fleet in the next 10 years.
What's going on here then? It sounds as though there's a need to build that base capability with the frigates first. How can it be that the decisions at ministerial level don't seem to understand that we're missing that base capability first?
Well, I think Richard Marles has emerged as a weak defence minister who can't secure any dollars for the defence budget. I think the government was foolish to give this kind of notional $360 billion price tag to the nuclear subs, because all of his ministerial colleagues say to Marles now, look, you've got $360 billion, although that's going to be spent over 30 or 40 years, so therefore you can't get any more money. The Australian defence establishment doesn't seem to want the Australian government to have a war-fighting capability in case they might deploy it one day. Marles made his first error by reappointing the service chiefs and or the Defence Force Chief and the Department Chief who had given us such dismal performance over the last 10 years, where all our projects are over time, over budget, never delivered. Senior ministers of both persuasions have told me the Hunter frigates, which we're going to spend $45 billion on, and we don't get one until 10 years from now, is a dog of a program. They'd get rid of it if they could, but they don't think they can let down another major defence supplier, especially the Brits. The government censored the Defence Strategic Review. So you remember when Kim Beazley had the Paul Dibb review in 1986, Dibb, who's a great guy, he has his limitations, but he just wrote what he thought, and you got the Dibb review. We've had this Defence Strategic Review. Richard Marles told us it'd be the most significant document in 30 or 40 years, but then he didn't let Houston and Smith publish it. Defence got it, completely bowdlerised it, gave us a sanitised version of the little bits and pieces they think they want to pay for, and then kicked off the review of the surface fleet into a further review to be run by defence establishment familiar figures. So the defence establishment always wants 100 fast jets, 8 to 11 surface ships, 6 subs, 3 brigade army, including our useless tanks, which we haven't used in more than 50 years, but we're still going to spend billions of dollars on. And it doesn't matter whether it's Peter Dutton or Richard Marles. It doesn't matter whether the doctrine is Forward Defence or Fortress Australia. The defence establishment just goes on and produces the same useless defence force time after time after time. The politicians never change it. And the Albanese government, which I had great hopes for in this space, is basically not doing anything. We're signed up to AUKUS to get nuclear subs beginning in 10 years' time. And in the meantime, we've got fewer vertical missile launch cells on our ships now than we had in 1995. This is not responding urgently to the Chinese threat. This is just having a lot of public announcements, cozying up to the Americans and hoping that they look after us. That's been our policy for the last 20 or 30 years, but it's very dangerous in this world that we live in now.